Okay, we're going into part 2 now on the Kraken, and if you haven't seen part 1 yet, go to the very end of this in your top right hand corner, or I guess it's top left now, they've changed it, is going to be part 1 again for you to see, and so you can go back and take a look at it and get the first part of it, because this is only the last third or so, and then I'm going to show you a couple of neat creatures and some other things, and maybe even tell the story. But first, I've got to get going on this. This is a depiction of the Kraken attacking a ship, and there are accounts of it having happened in the North Sea area. Quite a few, but most of those are whaling ships and something much smaller than this. But there's a fleet of 10 ships that were taken down at one time, and they said it was all done by these Kraken. There was also a ship taken off of Angola one time, and it was blamed on the Kraken. But the 10 ships, and maybe even the one off Angola, it was figured out later, was actually not caused by that, but because of a hurricane, for there was a few survivors of the event that recounted and told of themselves and which ships they had to do and which they had to do with. If you look at the wiki page on Kraken, it'll tell you that story also. But it's neither here nor there. So we were just looking at the Swedish author here and how he says that this thing that blows from its nostrils and stuff, that this must be the Leviathan of Job, and so this has got to be a whale he's talking about right here. And so what is the most likely candidate for the Kraken? Well, the Kraken is said to lie at the bottom of the sea in the search of food or when disturbed, probably by a large ship. Oh wait, I was running out of time on the last part up above here, wasn't it? Yeah. So they were saying, well, it looked like a giant octopus or squid, but it could be a crab, right? And that's not right here. That's up tall. Yeah, we already saw that. And so this idea that it could be a crab is kind of weird. Crab, because there are tales of this giant crab creature, and you've seen this in the tales of Odysseus and some of the other ones, and even Aladdin thing I think has a giant crab on the shore of it. The one recently is whenever they redid Land of the Lost, and the giant crab, they're all tripping, and a giant crab starts coming at them, and it gets boiled by a natural spring, and all of a sudden they're just having the best of crab dinner, but having no garlic butter. Damn. So weird thing about that is there's this crab called a shamefaced crab, and it will actually filter feed out of its water. It has these little hands that look like little feather dusters that come out right in front of its mouth, and it collects food by those. It has two others in front of it that help to clean that are small, but then the larger claws that it has, it can take and close up over its face. And they call it a shamefaced crab because he looks like he's covering his face, but he's actually protecting himself versus triggerfish and other fish that may try to bite them. But also, this thing was known as a fountain crab, one of the more famous ones come out of the Caribbean that we have right down here, and it's known as a calico crab because it has this paisley calico crab pattern all over it, and they're white porcelain, but they have this little pattern on them of like a brownish red, which is pretty cool. But they're also called fountain crabs, and because they can percolate water in front of them so fast when they run it around, if they're in a shallow puddle of water, i.e. just a couple of inches above them, it percolates the water. And one can imagine if they expounded on the idea of a crab that's about, the size of a dinner plate at most, and how it can really churn the water like that. If I was to imagine one that gets that big, what it could do, and how it could be the cause of whirlpools and tidal pools and things like that, right? Because if they see these little bitty cuttlefish which if you've ever had a bird like a parakeet or any of those guys, a budgie, if you're in the UK, you get these little things that are cuttles that are, this long, and you put them in their cage and they use that on their beaks, and that's part of the cuttlefish's cuttle. So you can imagine if you got a giant cuttlefish, how big that cuttle would be. But then also, your imagination would say, well, if a little cuttlefish can get this big, how big in the bottom of the ocean is one of these crabs? Or blah, blah, blah. And here comes the fishtails, right? So, what's the candidate? That's where we were at. Stories generally claim that when humans made contact with a kraken, there was sure to be trouble. Some folk tales refer to the creature as the Sea of Mischief, which hints at their nature, but may even be a bit of a lighter nickname than it deserves when you consider the scary stories of giant beasts capturing ships full of men and pulling them down to the depths of the sea, down to Davy Jones' locker. If the strong tentacles of the sea monster failed to pull down a ship, then it would supposedly swim quickly in circles around the ship, causing a tidal pool or whirlpool to achieve its maleficent goal. The myth of the Kraken is believed by many historians to have originated from the giant squid, though nowadays. If the Kraken is based on a giant squid, this could explain the description of the belch or poop the creature is said to emit, a confusion of the onlookers witnessing the squid trying to protect itself by squirting its ink. There's also ancient tales. I always talk about magic and scrolls and all those things to go with D&D, that you would use squid ink on certain magic scrolls and then the other type of ink for other types of scrolls, and you're like, what the hell? But then this special Kraken ink, if you could get it in any way, shape, or form somehow, was invisible unless you were in the moonlight. When you're in the moonlight, you could easily see it. Isn't that neat? Just little things they can throw in like that. But of course, a narwhal's horn is a unicorn's horn. In fact, when my guys were doing the adventure, that became part of this area that we were doing. Here's a look at a giant squid, history of the Kraken. The giant squid can reach up to 13 meters, 43 foot in length, and I think that's wrong. I think they found one that was over 60 foot in length. Although it was dead, there it is. But I'll tell you something else in a minute. It has been rarely seen by humans as it lives in very deep waters. The large tentacles and shocking appearance of the then unknown creature would have understandably inspired the fantastical stories. Even today, there's a sense of mystery, awe, and sometimes terror in what people hear stories about giant squids inhabiting the dark and foreboding depths of the ocean. With so much of the deepest parts of the ocean still unexplored by humans, it's possible that the stories of the Kraken were created off something even larger, more ancient, and more terrifying than any animal we know today. And while that last statement here is possible, because we had all but written off giant squids, even though people had found, especially in some old black and white photos, washed up chunks and things like that of things that they realized, well, that's a tentacle, so that's like an octopus, and it helped to breed stories of giant octopus, giant squid. But then again, if there's a tentacle and this isn't fake, there it is, it's rotting, it stinks, it's made out of real stuff, then that has to be that. So these giant squid can reach up to 13 meters or 43 foot, right? And when you look in these guys, they have these suckers on them. See, you can see that are giant right there on them, right here. Now, it's hard to take in picture-wise, but the eye here on the side of it here is the size of a basketball. Easily the size of a basketball. So in that effect, those suckers that are there are oh, I don't know, what are they, 5, 6 inches across, easily, big as a softball then, right? The suckers that are down here on him, right here, versus the eye. Well, one of my old books over here, and I couldn't find it whenever I was starting to look for this. I think it's in a box in the attic. Has some pictures where they're talking about this, and I got into this way back when Jaws came out, and I was into sharks and giant squid and things that made me not want to hang my feet off the bed when I slept at night. But they had whaling pictures of these guys that had these big, man, giant long sticks that on the end of them had this blade onto the end of them. It looks like what you'd call a glove type of thing, which was a spear with a blade on the end of it, a bill or a glove arm type of weapon, but much bigger. And this thing was hellish sharp. And you can see these guys running down a whale and just laying it open and being able to cut through that first layer of the whale all the way through, which is about 6-8 inches thick, and then you're reaching the inner part of it and they're going out and cutting them. Well, there's some of the pictures they took of these guys. I wish I could try to pull one up right now, but I don't want to waste your time doing it necessarily. But there are pictures of these guys, and on the whale that's there behind them, they have sucker marks that are on those whales. And if you look at them, well, they're standing right there in front of the whale, and so that's behind them, i.e. not as big as them, and they have sucker marks as big as the guy's head or bigger. And you think, oh man, okay, no way. These sucker marks here of this one that they say is 43 foot is going to be sucker marks about as big as 8 inches or a softball. But even though this thing is behind them, therefore the perspective would be even greater thrown off by it, has sucker marks bigger than their head. And there's a row of them running right down it to where you can see that, oh, he must have got wrapped around in things, wrapped around the face and threw around the side on their body. Long run of them. Yeah, and they start to get smaller here, but man, look at these size of these ones that are right here. And I know they say the colossal squid gets a little bigger suckers than this, that, and the other. And still, it'd have to be a colossal squid that's got to be, oh man, reaching up on 80, 90 foot. Unless it's just a mutant that has gigantic suckers, or it's a different thing than we haven't seen. And so that leads to the last of what we're talking about there. So I wrote a paper on cephalopods before whenever I was in marine studies. And crustaceans in general too once. But just as a phylum order type thing situation. But and that'll work all with, you know, cnidarians, all these snails and crap like that that goes along with it, mollusks and clams and bivalves in situations like that that aren't the same situation as this guy here. But let's look at something here real quick and see if we can see something neat. Here's a form of octopus that's found around Bali, and you'll see it listed as a zebra octopus, and that's not the one that you're looking for really. And it's weird, they look almost alike to each other. And but there's also a third type known as a wonderpus, and it seems to be the true mimic octopus, and you're looking at it here. And those bars and lines that you see on his body, they're creating these patterns. He can change at will, and a lot of octopus can change the texture and their color of their skin at will. It's amazing to watch them actually do it. To watch one that's fairly smooth with slight bumps on it, that's a lot of times the way they swim and do, and it'll do that ghost looking shape swim, but whenever it starts to get near a bush or a rock or something and knows you're after him, kind of checking him out and taking damn pictures of him, they'll suck up to that rock, and instantly they'll start looking like bushes and get frilly little stuff all over them and marble up, and all of a sudden their outline almost disappears. By contrast, I've seen videos where the diver has seen them, but the other people don't, and he goes up and he's literally fixing to touch the damn thing, and all of a sudden it changes colors and looks. I remember going on a night dive and saw one, and he changed sky blue. I mean sky blue. I mean like the background of that sky blue right in front of us. He was all marbled up and getting pissed off and everything. People taking pictures of him. But this mimic octopus, man, it's a terrible shot right here. But he can mimic a scorpion fish, and he can mimic a type of sole that's poisonous, like a flounder thing. He can mimic a lionfish whenever they swim out in the open, and he can also take and just use two of his arms, wrapping the other ones around his body, and looking like a crate snake, which is one of the most venomous snakes and a sea snake in the world. And the odd thing that these people that have researched and noticed it is, well, whenever they go swimming along and they run into a triggerfish, they don't look like a lionfish. Why? Because triggers are known to pick at them sometimes. So what do they look like? Well, they're going to look like something else that he doesn't like the sea snake. But then whenever he goes away, he'll turn from the sea snake to looking like the lionfish and going on. And why he can go with camouflage, he chooses to be very conspicuous and put a pattern on him that is known in the wild to be danger. Here's a shark secret for you all. These crate snakes are so scared by most creatures out there that people that go and mess and wrangle sharks and do things like that will carry a stick, and all it is black and white stripe. You can do something as simple as put electrical tape stripes around a piece of PVC and take the thing with you, and sharks will really have a hard time wanting to mess with you. Yeah. So, not only can they try to mimic the ground and do things like that you're kind of seeing here, a mimic's not so great at it, but he can splay himself out and do these patterns that mimic other fish. It's real interesting. And this might be a better representation of him mimicking the sea snake, mimicking the sole type flounder that's poisonous, the lionfish type of apparatus, and here he is doing that sole type thing. It's pretty neat. A lot of people don't know about them. I've gotten in quite a few of them over my years for people. They don't seem to last more than a couple of years at the most for anybody, and they seem to need a varied diet and would like something to be live, and just giving them live ghost shrimp and your occasional emerald crabs and some other crabs that you have to buy. They're fairly expensive. Not too much. Tell you a story. I used to have a common octopus, but it was a Bali dwarf octopus. It's Octopus jabani. And they don't get too big. They max out maybe 2 foot across when they stretch all their crap out, right? Like we. But they generally stay balled up in something smaller. And of course, that's a giant. That's a guy that gets 6'9", and a lot of ones that you get will only get in the 5'8" to 6 foot range and might get a little over a foot across. Well, I had this one that I had gotten that was about 6 or 8 inches across, and had him for about a year and a half. I knew he wasn't going to last much longer, and a lot of times they'll turn around and lay eggs, and when they lay eggs, then they stop feeding and care for their eggs. As soon as they hatch, they'll cash out. I knew this was going to happen. It was only like a 39-gallon aquarium, so it's only like 3 foot by 18 inches by 2.5 foot, but they don't need that much space in him, and he's really the only thing that was in there. And I would occasionally put a few damsels in there, which are these little bitty fish that are fairly cheap, and he would peck them off one by one because they'd go at night and go hide in the rocks that he lived in, and he would just lean over and go snatch and take them, and that would be a supplemented diet. And I gave them good foods while they were alive in there, and would throw them in crabs every once in a while, crawdads every once in a while, things like this, and vary his diet. I also threw little trinkets in there for him to get used to. But you could go up to that aquarium. At the time, I had 17 aquariums in the house. And some of these tanks were huge, 150 gallons, 135, 210, 350-gallon aquariums. But there was this aquarium that wasn't that large, and it seemed to almost have nothing into it, if a damsel or two, usually when somebody would come over. And I had a friend that had been over a few times, and I'd known him for a while, but he had never known that I even had the octopus in there. And I had him trained somewhat, and so what I would do was I would tap on it with my ring and my finger, and I would tap on the edge of the glass, and whenever I did, he would come out, and he knew it was his time. I had the lid secured down with Velcro on him, and so if I ever started to mess with the Velcro too, he'd come out like crazy. And so I got this guy to lean over and look in there, and I go, man, I've put fish in there. And he goes, where? And he leans in, and I go, tap, tap, tap on the side, and I jerked on one side of the Velcro while he was there, and all of a sudden he came out like whap and hit the front glass and just scared the hell out of this guy. He goes, oh my God, you got an octopus and all that. And I go, yeah, and now I got to feed him too. So hold on, we got to thaw this out. So I went and grabbed him a couple pieces of krill and thawed it out and gave it to him, like, here, bud, sorry for teasing you, because a lot of times I tease him with that like a dog with a treat. And so whenever I don't even give him a treat or one of his little foods that he likes a lot, but his least favorite food, it's kind of a meh situation. And you don't want to do that to octopus. They're pretty smart. So let's look at one more thing and tell you another story here. Don't want to end on a sad note, but sometimes I guess it has to be that way sometimes. But so I talked about a blue ring octopus, and man, these things are cute as shit, right? But it's one of the most poisonous creatures on the planet, and there's no way in hell this dude should be touching it. In fact, people have realized that he emits off of him a venom upwind of a creature and can take him out. That they have seen in the wild, them filming them crunched up into rocks like this here, and whenever they do, they'll start displaying these rings, and they literally pulse. They like this, like, you don't want none. Well, a crab comes up and it starts to come around the corner and get close because he's scared too, and he comes into the same crook that this guy's in, and all of a sudden he leans up into the rocks, gets over here, and that's upwind slightly, and all of a sudden the crab just wilts, and then he goes over and just sucks onto the crab. It basically turns off the thing in your brain that makes you want to breathe in and out, and your heartbeat. And there's a few different forms of them, but these guys are extremely venomous, so messing around with one like this is just stupid. Here it talks about blue ring octopus venom, right? Should just turn that off, sorry. So they can show in different forms, and generally they're off the coast of Australia is where you'll find them most, and that's where they know the ones there are poisonous. And because people have played with them like this and they get bit, and all of a sudden they just shut down. They literally just shut down and die. So I'll tell you a kind of sad story. Whenever I was running that fish store that I was doing for a while, there was a customer that I got in from Australia, and we were just blah 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 and everything else, and they had been in maybe 10 times, and they got a fish tank, and they wanted some Australian fish to be like from home, and so I got them a Australian tusk, and the version from there was a sailfin tang and a couple of other fish that were from there, and then they went ahead and got the other fish that they liked to finish off their tank. But anyhow, great couple. But they said I got in this octopus, and I was showing the customers, and they got to take a look at him. And whenever it became their turn to, maybe them to be the customer or whatever, a time of them, they asked me about it. He asked me about it, and he goes, "Have you ever heard of a blue ring octopus?" And I go, "Yeah, those things are poisonous as hell. You don't want to mess with them. But I can get them in on my list, but I don't do it for people because I don't ever want to be the cause of that effect." Years ago, I got one in for a guy that said he knew what the hell he was doing and everything, but I'll tell you about that one in just a second too. So he goes, "Well, I'm gonna tell you a story he goes, have you heard about this girl that died there? And this was in the early 90s, 1992, maybe 93. This girl that died, and they go, yeah, I think I've heard about it. Somebody said about it. I always hear about things like that. I'm kind of hooked up into a network that people gabber about it, and they're like, hey, somebody died from a box jellyfish or the irukandji. And he goes, oh, yeah, irukandji, and da-da-da, and started talking about them. And he goes, you know, they're so small, they make it through the nets that they have out there even to catch the small things, and that they screw you up. A lot of people, they basically just go into shock. And he goes, but blue ring, when it takes you, it just shuts off the thing that makes your mind work. And I was like, terrible. And he goes, well, I tell you a story about that girl, because we live next door to the people that were there. And I was like, wow, okay, wow. And didn't think we were going to go there really. And he goes, so what happened was this girl was playing out in the wading pools. And so at low tide, it'll get little wading pools, and she's going around messing with stuff in the wading pools. And you might find a starfish or this, that, and the other. She couldn't have been 5 years old. And I think in the real story, though, that she was almost 6. But still, he said she couldn't have been 5 years old. And she was playing around the wading pools and found one and came to tell her mom. And when she came to tell her mom, she couldn't talk right. She was making funny sounds. And she showed the thing to her and basically just fell onto the beach and everything off of it. And the lady didn't know what it was. And she threw sand on it and pushed it away and grabbed her child and stuff and started yelling. And this couple that were there, this is a beach that's not really a public beach. It's a beach, but it's way down the road from a public beach. But and these people had a beach house there, and they're out there or whatever, and they heard the lady screaming. If they go out there to her, and they come to her, and they said, you know, she told her, my daughter came up with this octopus, and they had to be the one to tell her that their daughter can still hear them, and that if there's anything they want to say to her, that they ought to do it right now, because she got bit by a blue ring octopus and she's going to die, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And he told me that story. It was just devastating for a while for me. I mean, I think about it sometimes still, especially whenever I think about things like these blue ring octopus. So I'll tell you another story too that this same guy related to me. He goes, I'll tell you another story that was very similar like that, and it caught his heartstrings worse. There was a man who lived here in the American States who came to the Great Barrier Reef for his 50th birthday because his wife was going to let him dive on the Great Barrier Reef, and he had dove on the Caribbean, but he wanted to dive there. And I go, yeah, I can understand that. I've driven the Caribbean bunch, and man, the Great Barrier Reef. And he goes, anyhow, so they were diving, and out of nowhere, this guy started shutting down and hit the surface, and they were like, dive her up, but wasn't nobody supposed to come up. They've been gone 15 minutes, and they're supposed to get 35, 40 minutes, even for these people sucking wind, you know, breathing too fast and using up all their air, and can't breathe correctly or anything yet. And so he comes up, and when he comes up, he can't describe to them, and he can't talk to them and everything, and he's trying to breathe, and he's trying to talk to his wife, and then all of a sudden he just goes stupid, just stupid. And then all of a sudden he snaps out of it, and he's trying to talk to his wife, but he can't make words. And then he looks frustrated, and he just loses it, and he's just gone. And he comes back, and he's gone. And then he starts shutting down, and he starts making this noise whenever he's wheezing type breathing going on. And all of a sudden the guys on the boat realized what the hell had happened. And he had been bit by a blue ring octopus, and his wife was right there on the boat. She didn't dive, but she, you know, was sitting there just cackling with the men until all of a sudden he popped up. And they had to tell her that he just got bit by a blue ring octopus, and even if they had the antidote on the boat right now, expecting it to happen, knowing it was going to happen, they couldn't have saved him right now off of it. And that he, even though looks incoherent, he can still understand what you're saying. And if there's anything you want to say to him before he passes away, you've got a couple of minutes. Can you imagine that be told to you? So anytime that I had somebody go, oh, you give me a blue ring octopus, I'll put him on my little reef tank and stuff, I tell them no. I tell them that story and I go, you still want one? Regardless of what they say, I tell them I'm not going to get you one. So there's a guy that I did get. His name was David Matz, and his dad was god awful rich. And for his birthday, whenever he was like 9, they got him a reef tank, and he started liking it. So they got him a huge 240-gallon reef tank. No, it was a 225. Whenever he was about 14 or so, started working in the same shop I was running, and he wanted to get one, and he was going to put it in his reef tank. Now, he told us that he was going to put it in his other tank that he had set up, which was really kind of a quarantine tank because he hadn't had anything to put in there in forever. But he put it in there, then he did a water change out of the reef into that, then he threw him into the damn reef tank. Well, everything was okay, and he even was able to do water changes, but not correctly, and didn't, he was a little skitsy about the whole thing going on. He lost his cleanup crew at first and a couple of fish. And then all of a sudden, in one of his little cave areas, he looked, and this thing had eggs. And all ringed around it, and it was hanging around, and he figured out where it was. Yeah, after only seeing it a couple of times after putting it in there. And so he knew he was screwed then, and they would be little baby ones all over the place, and he wasn't going to be able to really do water changes or do anything to where he was supposed to do. So he waited around. And then I talked to him about it and everything, and what the hell are you going to do? And what he did was, whenever he took his day off over the weekend, or coming into the weekend, he actually took a couple of bottles of bleach and poured it in his reef tank, which was full of exotic corals and kick-ass fish. He must have had thousands of dollars, but he goes, I couldn't take one out of there and knowing that the piece of rock didn't have a couple of them on there and whatever, and then I don't know. So basically he had to just choke the whole tank out. He poured bleach in there and killed the whole thing. And then he didn't siphon it out for over a week. It started stinking real bad. He started sleeping in this other room, and he opened up his window and closed his door and let it vent out of there. His mom got so mad he finally had to get a python system for me, which runs off a suction and takes it out of the window, and it basically evacuated out onto his yard. But they were all dead by then. But I mean, he killed thousands of dollars worth of reef tank there in just one shot, and then he had to totally do a reset on it and dechlorinate it and run it for a while, and then do a reset on it, salt water, and set it all back up again. And that next time he didn't even do a reef tank. He ended up doing some aggressive fish that he never had before, and a puffer and some other stuff. But yeah, that was the last guy that I actually got one for. And I had one time whenever I was running my shop right there at the very end, and the guy that I ordered from had him on his list, and I talked to him about him, but I didn't order one at all. And in my order, he sent me one, but it was already dead in the bag. Yeah, but he sent me one. It was on the list, but it had a mark next to it, like 0. And then it didn't look like it was dead before he shipped the thing to me, but the water was starting to get tacky by then. But anyhow, tell you one more invertebrate story, and if I ever do an invertebrate bit, it might be on that. But this is people having mishaps and stuff. There's a cone snail that's about the most poisonous creature on the planet also. Let's see if I can look at this. Cone snail. So this sucker right here, and there's variations on a theme of them. Some of their shells are really inconspicuous. Other ones like Geographica and Marmorated and so on. So there's a lot of different forms of these cone snails. But what these cone snails do is this little proboscis that's sticking out here, that you see this guy messing with here, shoots out a little harpoon out of it. See that little hole right there? And it hits a fish, and the toxin works so fast that within a quarter of a second, or one twitch of a fish, he basically just shuts down and then the guy just goes over and envelops and eats the whole thing. When I was getting in live rock, I knew about this, and I had this thing on my wall about snails and different pictures of them. And there it was over in the corners. There's 3 or 4 versions of cone snail. It wasn't all of them or anything. But in a book that I had dive books for areas, and every dive book had things that you would see and mention it. And then it had taboo and red on the top of venomous things and fish and things like that you see. And the cone snail is always one that I'd show to people and go, here's something that's poisonous. You know, they want to know, ooh, sharks and everything else when they come in to talk to me. But that's the thing about cone snail. I got in live rock one time, though, and I always picked up the pieces of live rock, which is basically moistened, paper wrapped chunks of live rock from the ocean that all the corals have been taken off of, and you stack it up into your tank and then put your corals back onto it and grow it, right? And it puts a chunk of Mother Nature along with the sand and the live sand back in the water to help give you a piece of Mother Nature, if you will. But I looked between my pinky and my ring finger, right in between there on a piece of live rock, and there was a cone snail stuck to the live rock, looking at my finger, and I dropped the piece of live rock and it hit the ground, broke a piece off of it and everything. I went over there and I took another deal and flicked him off of there, got him out of there, put him in a tray. We have these trays we catch the fish and stuff in that were clear. Put him in a tray, and he was still alive. When we got to the bottom of that box, I told the guy that was helping me, be ultra careful. We're going to flip things over and take a real good look and pull it out. And we're going to set it on this table thing that we had and take other looks at it. Make sure there's none that we're putting even in our live rock system and everything. But wow, scared the hell out of me. Tell you another story about these guys right here. There was an article, must have been back about, I don't know, 99, 98, 1997, 98, 99, right around that range. There was these guys that were over in the Iraq War, and these big old Marines, no-neck sons of bitches, you know what I'm saying? These big old guys, right? And they get to go on leave. And they go to islands in the Philippines, and there's a whole group of them going there. And they show the pictures that this guy takes with his camera, and they show them partying and they're drinking beer, hanging out on the beach. And they take them to a beach that's not a beach for public people, so they can be alone pretty much and not have any problem, because that's what they wanted. And there's rocks out in the water and stuff, and they're going out there, and this guy's looking around on all these rocks and stuff that are, you know, they're in neck deep water at most, and he finds these snails in these rocks, and so he grabs a couple of them and he brings them on shore, and the guy's sitting there taking pictures of them, and he's like, hey, take a picture of me with these cool snails that I found, and he sticks them to his chest on his top up by his neck, right like that. Hey, take a picture of me. He gets him finally holding on to him, and he lets go, and they're stuck to him, and he goes, ta-da, and the dude takes a picture of him. Well, right after they take that picture of him, the one on the left or the right, whatever the hell it is, and it hits him in the throat, and the guy takes it and pulls it away, and he throws it on the ground. He's like, you know, what the hell? Well, within about 30, 40 seconds, all of a sudden the guy starts speaking gibberish. Doesn't make any sense. Then all of a sudden he looks frustrated, starts making these weird gestures, starts pissing himself, falls over on the ground, starts convulsing and going through these things and trying to, when he fell over, he's trying to just make himself right, and he's going through all this spasms and shit, trying to get himself right. And the guys thought he was joking at first, and he sat there, and what they said, he sat after he jerked those few times and tried to get him straightened out, and then they quit laughing and they tried to get onto him. He breathed about 3 more times and then quit breathing and just stared off and died right in front of us. Took out a jar head that quick. Boom. You can still find the story on that. Marine dies by cone snail. Bet it'll tell you about it. He played around with them, looking around taking a picture, and it popped him, and I believe it was in the neck, and it just took him. They've got this toxin inside of them. They thought about messing with it and trying to mess with humans and see if they could just give them people just a very, very slight amount, if it would be something that they could use for anesthesia or something like that. But it looks like it would be it's just too strong, and they'd have to thin it down by a real extreme portion and then try to start working with trials on it. And I don't think they've done that much, and that's been 20 years, and I haven't heard anything lately on it, but I'm not in those circles so much anymore. But anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And so there's some stories about the Kraken, and hey, I hate to leave it on a bad note there, but let's go back to the Kraken real quick as we go to leave off this. For what do you think the Kraken is? Do you think the legendary story comes from the giant squid or whales, or was this a combination of things? Because in the old pictures, when they showed whales out there, they're saying it's a sea demon, sea creatures, sea dragons. There be dragons. A lot of them have it listed right below them, and then you look at them later and you go, that's the whales. So are they talking about whales? For when the other descriptions there seemed like it had a lot of tentacles. But then there's versions where it has a lot of heads on it, blowing mist out of its nostrils. Kind of strange, huh? Well, Neptune's got a little secret in the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. Under the sea, down here with me, in an octopus's garden, in the shade. Like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy. Peace.